I tried my best to explain my reasoning on why we should use our current morals when it comes to child marriage. Alright, so this is a continuation. We have already two parts of video basically where I cover the comment by this YTSALTTV1056, and because he numbered the paragraph and divided into several comments, so I make one video per comment. So this is the third one, but I didn't realize that this is the direct continuation of number 8, because in the previous video we have covered until number 8, which at number 8 it covers about child marriage, because all of these are first time of me even reading all these comments, so I didn't realize number 9 is direct continuation. So I stopped there and suddenly it is here. So to you that commented here, this video is with me having said whatever I said about the topic here in the previous video. If relevant, I'll repeat certain things, but if I don't think I need to repeat, I think you already covered the previous video to understand where I'm proceeding from based on what I have already said, right? So that's just to put in context. For the rest of you, feel to have a proper context, do watch the two previous video to know the flow of all these comments from this person who is an atheist. And I have to say that I normally enjoy certain discussion with atheists, because normally we evaluate things rationally and with logic, etc., right? So I like that kind of conversation, because I do believe that Islam is very rational and logical. Anything not rational, not logical, it wouldn't be Islam. So everything in Islam should be able to explain rationally and logically. Hence, that's why, because if I discuss about any topic with other people of a different faith, it is about which book is true, right? We cannot even discuss about topics like this, because our standing point is very different already, right? So we have to go back, otherwise it's not even fruitful. But with atheist or free thinker, it is very interesting for me, because everything in Islam can be presented logically and rationally, and I hope I do a good job to convey that to an atheist. Anyway, going back to here, I tried my best to explain my reasoning on why we should use our current morals when it comes to child marriage. So, okay, we'll read first. Can you give me your fundamental reasoning on why child marriage should be allowed in 2025? Why it is not wrong despite the harms we know it would cause, based on our understanding from the advancement we made in the medical field and understanding of human body. Even in the most developed countries with the best medical care, getting pregnant at a very young age is dangerous. Now, imagine in some of the poor countries out there where this practice is done. Children die, it is harmful. Maybe your explanation and reasoning will change my mind and make me believe it is okay to risk life and health of children. Now, I believe you have covered the previous video. And from the principle of a marriage of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam with Aisha, the fundamental of physical maturity, the readiness for that kind of relationship is already established. So I hope that that point is already made in that video, where any Muslim or anyone want to practice the fundamentals behind what happened with Prophet Muhammad SAW with Aisha, the marriage, that waiting period and emphasize or endorse or underline the fundamental that this, whatever this is, for example this, what, risk life, etc., right? So if you want to say that it is okay to risk life, no, it's never okay. It's never okay. It's never okay. So in Islam, that's never okay. That is shown by this marriage as well, right? So I hope that's very clear. I would never say it is okay to harm, etc., etc., because that's not the Sharia. That's not the fundamentals applied in this marriage. The fundamentals applied is that sexual relationship only after the physical maturity is reached, clear cut. So there's no such thing as Islam allow something that is risking health is not even allowed, right? What more risking lives with this kind, right? Even in, okay, taking a step back, right? Even in things that fundamentally it's like you have to obey, like for example fasting in the months of Ramadan, right? Fasting in the months of Ramadan. Even in that case, if that generally is fundamental for all Muslim, you have to do it. But for the case of anyone that have real medical case where doing that is harmful for you, then you shouldn't do that. It's you become an exception to the rule, because the more underlying fundamental is that you shouldn't directly knowingly harm yourself as such. If you know, what else is fundamentally compulsory for Muslim, right? You fundamentally is the general rule is pork is haram, right? Eating pork is haram. If in a situation of darurah, where hypothetically there's no food, you are starving, you need to eat to stay alive, and there's only pork available, this is totally hypothetical, I'm not sure how this happened, that's the only one that you can eat to stay alive, then that general rule is not applied there, because hifzul, you have to protect your life, even if at that particular moment you do not eat, you can eat, you are allowed to eat to stay alive, not to eat until you're full. You understand, right? So at that meaning, what I'm trying to emphasize is, when we go into any specific discussion, there are fundamentals that we already established. This is easier to understand as Muslim. So when we say about such marriage, we already understood that anything that risk health, risk life, etc. is no, can go, no. Right? So that's understood from the get-go. In this particular case, that it is weighted, and it happened that for that age, for that particular girl, she's already mature enough. No health issue, no complication, no risk. Right? So I think this one I have covered in the previous video. So and also here, right? Why is not wrong? Because this is wrong question to ask, because I do not say this, right? But I understand your position, because you assume this ruling do not have that clause about it should never cause any harm emotionally, psychologically, physically, whatsoever, right? So when you say why it's not wrong despite the harm, so in the previous video I already mentioned harmful physically, we have established no, right? It should be maturity physically before any of such activity is involved. That's clear cut. Before, because we have two phases, right? The phase of marriage before that activity. Normally the harmful aspect that I can think of is emotionally or psychologically, because there's no physical whatever you do that that is harmful, right? So I would think, is there any discussion about psychologically or emotionally? And I have addressed back then that aspect is taken care of. The father that should be as protective as ever should already taken care or taken that into consideration before allowing any proposal or say it's not the time yet, right? Yeah, so there's no harm allowed. I hope that is understood. So that's why I asked the hypothetical question in the previous video. In a hypothetical circumstances nowadays, right? If there's no real harm, there's no potential harm whatsoever, right? Because I understand your reasoning. It should not be considered moral because it is harmful, and we know it is harmful. Now, if for any case where, let's say it's hypothetical, where we know for a fact it is not harmful in any way, shape or form, and added to that, there are many benefits from a marriage, would you still say no, this is not moral, despite no harmful, despite beneficial for her? If you say no, it should be still standardized at a certain age, for example, if so, why? That would be my position, because I want to understand what else is the concern. Is there's no issues of physical, emotional, psychological, power dynamic, meaning there's none of that issue, right? Because those are among the issues that I can think of okay, the girl should be protected, because if there is power dynamic issue, she do not know her right, etc., and she's being abused, okay, should not be. If that is a potential, the father should say no from the beginning. Okay, psychological, emotional, physical, right? So that should be already taken care of. So is there any reason outside of harm, right, physical, emotional, psychological, power dynamic, that you want to say that it is not moral, right? Maybe it's something that I haven't think of, so please do share. I ask how I can determine if the Prophet is truly the best example for us human. Your answer was the following: I have to believe that God is real first, accept that God is the one who determines what is moral and not, find out which book is truly from God, and then find out that Islam is from God, accepting that Muhammad is the messenger, and finally accept all the Islamic teaching of Islam. In short, you said I cannot determine if the Prophet is the best example because I am not a Muslim. Okay, this is your conclusion, not mine, right? There is no room for reason, logic, or at least look at his life and see if he lived is the best way to live in 6th century now and the future. Okay, the first part, this is what I said in term of how to say, in term from the belief perspective. I don't understand your context in context of question, in the sense that, okay, leaving belief aside, can we rationally and logically see if this is really a best example, right? And thank you for that question, because I say here is in the form of there are many wisdom that we cannot see directly yet, perhaps, right? So the wisdom for that might be revealed, or we come to understand much later. Just like many miracles in the Quran, etc., we only uncover those much later, right? Even the companions, the Sahaba, never knew about those. But why did they accept it? Because it was established, what I mentioned here, right? Meaning that it is proven that this is truly a prophet of God, etc., and it is accepted based on that concrete conclusion that lay out the foundation. This is truly prophet of God, etc., etc., and hence we reach that point that whatever he did, even if it includes something that I cannot see yet the wisdom behind it, it is the best example, right? So that is from that perspective. Now, going back to your question about is there any room for reason, logic, or at least look at his life and see if it is the best. Now, I hope I feel a bit, about how to understand conceptually, fundamentally, in principle, what Prophet Muhammad SAW did in that particular, because we are just talking about that particular marriage, which is the most controversial one, because he have so many examples in his life, how he deal with the elderly, how he deal with kids, etc., etc. All of those, I think across the board, people will say that if you look at all of those hadith, oh, this is the best example, this is the best, you treat kids in this with this dignity, etc., you treat, etc., right? So, but there are certain things that is harder to understand, including this, like the marriage. That is why many people who want to attack Islam attack this marriage, because it seems as if it's not a good example to follow, right? I hope until now the glimpse of how I elaborate in terms of if we understand the principles of what happened and what is applied in this marriage, it is still applied today to avoid any harm to the wife, right? Physically, emotionally, psychologically, as we mentioned earlier. So from that perspective, even in this most controversial topic, you can hopefully you can start to see that, oh, okay, that implies a very good example, right? He did not, just because Aisha is already his wife, he did not force himself onto her before she is mature and ready. You understand, right? Do you think that's not the best of example? Meaning that, you know, understanding the need of the wife, understanding psychological, emotional, physical, etc. needs and health and etc. That is embedded in the example. So do you think, or can you start to see that how that is rationally, reason-wise, logical? That's good example, or it's still not fully transpire yet, right? So I hope that start to give the glimpse of, if we go in depth in every single discussion here, you will have no other conclusion to say that, wow, this is the most comprehensive example to be the best person ever existed, that is as well documented as this person that ever lived, right? Because we have hadith, including the one narrated by Aisha herself, because the one that knows the most intimate thing in this marriage is Aisha, and among the wisdom is she have a long life after the death of Prophet Muhammad SAW to tell many things, to become guide and wisdom for the rest of us to learn how to become the best of husband, right? So yeah, I think I'm not saying, because the premise where I say the earlier part here is because if you start from there, I mean, okay, can you accept this? If I know now you do not believe in God, but hypothetically, or given that, provided that you go through this list, and provided that that is established, right? Provided that if you go into it and you conclude, oh, there must be God, right? If you go there, right? God is real, there must be God, there must be a creator, and this is really the religion, and this is really the prophet, the messenger of God, sent by God, etc., 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 right? Would you have to accept that when God dictated him to be the best of example, even though you do not see yet the full wisdom of everything, he is the best example, provided we understand how to apply it correctly, right? Because we talk about the number of the age, people who just see the number without having the package of all the principles coming together with that marriage, you know, you have to correct the brain function, right? But I'm talking in context now, right? So can you at least accept that, oh, provided that, so obviously he is the best example? That's number one. Of course I understand your point. Okay, putting that aside, let's talk rational, let's talk logical, let's talk reason. I hope some of the glimpse of the things that I've said until now already show that we can actually establish still, but it takes longer because you have to we have to elaborate all the fundamentals, etc., that might not be as obvious for those who are not well versed with the Sharia, etc., etc., and all the hadith and all, etc., etc., right? Which some of the Muslim would how to say, when we go to the hadith about the age, all of those are already the fundamentals that comes together, and we understood it there. But for those who are not familiar with this, I can understand you consciously or subconsciously map the issues with child marriages now, as you say, harmful, and people still do it, etc. Consciously or subconsciously, some people map it as if that can be related to the what Prophet Muhammad SAW did, when hopefully I've shared enough to say that no, right? Okay. You said in Islam, only prisoners of war are slaves. Then mention hadith on reward for releasing or freeing slave. You went on to say the number of slaves become less and less over time, and you mentioned that if the slave owner had a child with a slave, the child is not a slave. An important point you did not highlight: a slave that gave birth to a child of the owner would have to be freed eventually, or something like that. I don't remember. If two slaves had a child, was that child a slave or not? If two slave, meaning slave with a slave, right? Looking at history, it is a fact that slavery did not become less and less in the Caliphate. Okay, you are conflating two things, right? Okay, let's read first. Prisoners of war are not the only halal source of slave. Prisoners of war were the group of people Muslims were allowed to take away their right and make them slaves. Besides this, Muslims could not make random people slaves, but Muslims were allowed to go to slave markets and purchase slave people they did not go to war with, people captured and put into slave by non-Muslim. Okay, you are talking about slave that is not a result of what Muslim did, right? Muslim could go to Egypt and purchase slave there. This is why I highlighted that the slave from Egypt was not a prisoner of war. Okay, you did not talk about her at all. Why was she a slave and owned by the Prophet when she clearly was not a prisoner of war? I don't know if you are familiar with the Arab slave trade. It boomed and provided workforce for the Caliphate. Muslim would just purchase and capture African from slave traders, no question asked. This was allowed. Slavery was banned from the Arabian Peninsula in 1960s. So the claim that is slowly ending slavery is not true. Other nations had to force the Muslim to end slavery. So when I ask if slavery is moral or not based on the morals of God, there's no categories. I would be referring to people who are not captives of war and captives of war. Okay, now, okay, you are expanding the discussion here. Okay, I'm rushing out of time now because I have to fetch my kids from school. Okay, how many more points? Okay, I thought I want to finish this today, but apparently if I start to discuss this, I will be late for my child to fetch my kids from school. So I have to stop here. So I hope to remember to continue here, because what I said, just in short, right, what I said is not about what historically happened. What I said is the principles lay out the foundation for it to happen in that way. But yes, you are talking about, we are not living in a vacuum. There are other people that are doing certain things, and hence, as a big picture, how does Islam deal with this, right? So I think indirectly I've mentioned in the sense that I think in the previous video when you talk about slave, right, the Sharia have to deal with two things. One is what is already there as part of human life there, how to deal with this, and one is what kind of slave can possibly become, meaning someone who is not a slave suddenly becomes a slave Islamically. So that's I hope you remember the previous video where I mentioned about this. So that's partially maybe addressing this, but I'll go back into this inshallah hopefully next week, when I hope I will have another time to do this. So unfortunately I cannot finish this now because of time constraint. I have to rush. Hopefully until this it have been fruitful discussion, hopefully, inshallah. So God willing, we'll continue this soon. Thank you for watching. See you next time.